Uh, on June 28th, Ronald Stein published an article at Heartland. The world needs more than intermittent electricity from wind and solar. Ronald is an author, columnist, engineer, and energy policy advisor with a long career and a very interesting thought. So it's a pleasure to have you today here again, Ronald.
Armando, glad to be aboard.
That's great. Ronald, let me start with the perception of costs, please. What are the relative costs for wind and solar for customers in your perception? I know that you cannot have numbers in hand, of course, but for rich countries compared to poor countries, what's the thought about? What are the thoughts about that?
Well, I think Germany set the pattern because Germany was the first country to go green. They basically closed down their coal-fired power plants and uh, basically the nuclear power plants and went to wind and solar. And today they got the most expensive electricity in the world. It's intermittent electricity. The interesting about wind and solar is they don't work most of the time because the wind is not blowing most of the time, the sun is not shining most of the time. So yeah, you got to basically build a lot to get whatever power you can get out of it, and then we've got no way to store it. So it's a very expensive electricity, and that's the key thing about the article is wind and solar only generate electricity. They manufacture absolutely nothing for society.
They, do they use coal, nuclear, and they import liquid gas, natural gas from the United States? So the price may be higher in this case.
It's supply and demand. Yeah, you basically, the society we have today requires electricity 24/7, continuous, uninterruptible electricity. Wind and solar do not provide that. And so you basically have two systems. You have wind and solar, but you need a backup. If you want to keep the hospital running, you can't run when the wind's blowing and when the sun is shining. If you're in the operating room, you'd like to have, power all the time. So
Backup, yeah.
it's basically a backup, which is a redundant system. So you're building redundant systems, and to build two systems costs more than building one system.
Yeah, that's right. In our article, you make a list of items that cannot be, let's see, manufactured by wind and solar. We need hydrocarbons to make. So it's very interesting because tires, asphalt, medical equipment, communication, electronic systems, water filtration, sanitation, fertilizers. It's very important, no? Pesticides and wind turbines. Because everything in the world we cannot manufacture with wind and solar with like electricity.
Right. And item 9 is probably the most important one. All the parts are wind turbines, all the parts are solar panels, all their components are made with oil derivatives manufactured from crude oil. So you get rid of crude oil, you get rid of wind turbines, you get rid of solar panels, you get rid of the medical industry, you get rid of all the vehicles and the communications. The space program goes away, all the airlines get grounded, and it's horrendous because it's fossil fuel. The three fossil fuels, Armando. There's coal, natural gas, and crude oil, and they're lumped into fossil fuels. Well, I say coal is burned for power plants. Natural gas is burned for power plants, and oil is useless. It's 100% useless unless it's manufactured into something usable. And since 1900, the world is populated from 1 to 8 billion, primarily because of human ingenuity of what we've been able to do with what we manufacture out of crude oil. We get all these oil derivatives that we now make 6,000 products in our daily lives. Remember, the medical industry didn't exist before 1900. The transportation industry didn't exist before 1900. The space program, everything, all the electronics, go on and on and on. And then all the different fuels, the gasoline, the diesel, the aviation fuel, bunker fuels for different shipping arrangements, fuels for the space program. All these fuels are manufactured from crude oil, but crude oil by itself is just black, dirty mess. it's a, it's useless.
Ronald, in the last conversation, we talked a little bit about the perspectives of the new source of energy, let's see, could, let's see, fill this gap for that hydrocarbons do. I mean, replace hydrocarbons. What are the perspectives? You see that they are researching and developing some alternatives for hydrocarbons to petrochemicals?
Armando, we've had 200 years to replace crude oil because crude oil was really discovered around the late 1800s, early 1900s. And today we have 700 refineries manufacturing this crude oil into the derivatives that make all the products in our daily lives and the fuels for all the different transportation infrastructures. Because remember, today we got 6,000 products, we got 50,000 jets in the world, we got 50,000 merchant ships in the world, and that's all from those fossil fuels. And the only thing that the effort has been done in the last 10, 20 years is to renewables, to have renewable energy. Well, as I mentioned, it's not renewable energy, wind and solar, it's only renewable electricity, because they can only do one thing, generate electricity. The wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining, they're not doing anything. But they cannot manufacture, they physically cannot manufacture anything. I would love to replace fossil fuels. I mean, if people are concerned about getting rid of crude oil, let's get rid of it. But you need a backup plan. You got to identify its replacement before you decide to, turn 8 billion people off of what they're using in their daily lives. All our computers, the iPads, the defibrillators in the hospital, everything that needs electricity. Here's an easy thing to understand. Everything that needs electricity, everything is made with fossil fuels. Even the light bulb is made with fossil fuels.
Ronald, you worked as an engineer in Fluor, I suppose, designing equipment and operations, maintenance.
Yes.
I do not, yeah. So your experience were related to petrochemical plants too?
It was primarily petrochemical plants around the world. And it was, like I say, it's a very complicated process. But the benefits to society are just humongous. And to get rid of oil before we have a replacement, I think is immoral and unethical. I mean, there'll be billions of people. Like I say, we populated from 1 to 8 billion because of all the products, the medications we have. The weather-related deaths have been eliminated by 99%. We can live in cold weather. We can live in hot weather because of the products we have from fossil fuels. And wind and solar only generate electricity.
Yeah. But Ronald, tell me, please, what American schools are teaching kids in terms of energy, renewables, fossil fuel? What are they saying to the kids?
I think probably the disease is that they keep promoting the fact that renewable energy is going to replace fossil fuels. But renewables, which is basically wind and solar, only generate electricity. They cannot replace oil.
Yeah.
They only generate electricity. They manufacture nothing. And as I mentioned, you get rid of crude oil, you're going to get rid of wind turbines, solar panels, EVs. The 50,000 merchant ships go away. The 50,000 jets go away. President Biden is flying around in a 400-ton airplane, 100% made with fossil fuels. All the components, all the electronics, the seats, everything is fossil fuels. And it's powered by aviation fuel, which is manufactured from fossil fuels. And he's screaming in the microphone, we're going to get rid of fossil fuels. My God, Armando, the only good thing about getting rid of fossil fuels is your ground Air Force One.
Yeah. And we have a comment from a very famous guy, a Swiss, Italian, and French guy. Luca, how are you? Saying that we have a energy transition podcast, and he mentioned several months ago that's not transition, it's addition. He's right, and
Yes.
he sees that nuclear power is a solution for this situation. What do you see as that?
Well, I see, yeah, nuclear power because I think, we put a lot of money into the space program. I think we should put the same amount of money into the nuclear technology because the small modular reactors. I live here in California. In the United States, there's no nuclear. I mean, nuclear is out. But around the world, they're building nuclear everywhere because that is zero emission electricity and it's continuous and uninterruptible. And like I say, it requires a small amount of land. And I mean, even like I say, a lot of money being invested in small modular reactors because you can put a small modular reactor in and, provide power 24/7 to hundreds of thousands of people quickly. You can't do that with wind and solar.
And the consequence in case, I know that the risk is very low in the nuclear plants, but the consequence if something goes wrong, Luca, help me, maybe it's something very strong. What's your vision about that?
Well, I think when you take a look at the old nuclear, here in California, we had the San Onofre power plant and the Dialu power plant. When you take a look around the world, the old technology, I think there was like 20 people died from nuclear in the last 50 years. And I mean, it's extremely safe when you consider, other methods of, you know, transportation and et cetera, et cetera. And when you invest in small nuclear reactors, modular reactors, you're going to even improve that. I mean, take the automobile. The automobile, when it first came out, you open the hood, you can put three of your buddies under the hood. I drive a Mercedes. I open the hood, there's not enough room for a sandwich under the hood because of all the controls to control emissions, everything. We can improve that technology to be even safer than the older technology. So I think people want zero emission electricity. Duh. I mean, that is it. And I think, like I say, the world is building, I think, 40 or 50 nuclear power plants. The United States is building zero.
Luca is helping me here with another comment. Always welcome, Luca. Nuclear still provides some 20% of electricity in the US, and the technology is now being tested with, I cannot read very well. We'll have next to zero chance for any dangerous accident. Okay. Nuclear can also produce
Synfuels.
synfuels.
Yeah. Yeah. Synthetic fuels. Yeah. Because, even the oil industry is cleaning up the gasoline, renewable diesel. Even the Indy 500 race used a cleaner fuel. And so, yeah, I mean, there are alternate ways to do it, but and that's what we got to develop because wind and solar aren't going to do it. And so we need to, I think it's a no-brainer to go to nuclear.
Yeah, but nuclear, as wind and solar, cannot manufacture parts at the same time.
No. But the thing that nuclear does that wind and solar doesn't do, nuclear provides
Stability.
electricity, continuous, uninterruptible.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Right.
it requires less land, whereas wind and solar requires the right climatic conditions. Here in Southern California, we got a very mild climate, but some other parts of the United States in the Midwest, when you get the winters and the hurricanes and the tornadoes, and like I say, that it's horrendous. That you're putting a lot of responsibilities on wind and solar just to generate their intermittent electricity. If they're covered with snow, they're not going to generate anything.
Yeah. So nuclear cannot replace hydrocarbons for petrochemicals, but let's see, stabilize the system. It can go, let's see, replacing solar and wind.
Exactly, because as I mentioned, everything needs electricity, from your iPads to your TVs to your, defibrillators. I mean, your light bulbs. Everything that needs electricity is made with fossil fuels, and you want to have that fossil fuels provide the products, and you want to have continuous electricity. That's the key thing, continuous electricity.
Very good. Ronald, BlackRock CEO yesterday or 2 days ago said that he was ashamed of ESG political debate. What do you think about ESG? Do you believe in ESG? The concepts, the model is wrong. What's right and what's wrong in ESG?
Well, with ESG, the environmental, social, and governance, the thing that bothers me about ESG movement is they're setting energy policies in bank boardrooms, their investment opportunities. And if they think something is socially not right, they're not going to invest in it. And I think that's really a total disaster for humanity, is to have the banks decide energy policies. I think engineers have a better capability of doing that.
That's a good point. Very good point. Very good point. So banks deciding about energy policies and trends. Yeah, yeah. And they have trillions of dollars. It's impressive.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like you say, they can if they don't want to invest in, a new refinery, then the refinery may not be built. They'll invest in, wind and solar. They're just looking at ROI, but you got to take a look at, well, the space program. We've gotten so many benefits out of the space program. The technology, it's helped communication, it's helped the medical industry, and like I say, that was an investment that was made by engineers and government. Human technology is just unsurpassed, and we can accomplish almost anything.
Yeah, that's right. Luca is commenting again. I just finished listening to your refinery episode 1 hour ago, and Ron mentioned that the importance of energy efficiency. Remember, so the more efficiency means more total use. See Gibbon's paradox.
Well, no, there is energy efficiency. You go back to the first automobiles, we get 8 to 10 miles to a gallon. Now if it's just gasoline, it's 40, 50, and even more. So everything has become more efficient, and that's what we got to focus on: efficiencies and conservation. Because oil's not going to be around for billions of years, but we want to basically become as efficient as possible and conserve as much as we can. We don't want to waste it. And if we can conserve and be efficient, we can eliminate the toxic waste dumps. Because like I say, we tend to use things and just throw it away. And that's not, you can't survive that way.
Ronald, OPEC last week said that the forecast to oil consumption, the demand, will be around 110 million barrels a day in 2030. International Energy Agency said exactly the opposite. So, two conflict concepts. What do you see about this forecast?
Well, take a look at the reality. I mean, right now it's the wealthy countries of Germany, Australia, Great Britain, and the USA that represent about 6% of the world's population, a little over 500 million people versus 8 billion in the entire world. In the entire world, which is 8 billion, more than 80%, which is more than 6 billion people, they're living on less than $10 a day. They haven't joined the Industrial Revolution. So we're living in a different environment with all the niceties around us in our workplace, in our home, and where these developing countries are in terrible shape. They would like to be like us. And if they do, make some progress over the years, they will be consuming more of those products and using more of those products for their sanitation systems, their water filtration systems, their medical industry. And yeah, it's, even today, almost half the world, which is more than 3 billion people, they're living on less than $2.50 a day. Mm-hmm. They can't subsidize themselves out of a paper bag. And so there's a lot of people that, like I say, we're living the good life, but you take a look at some of the photos you see in Africa. The book we wrote, Clean Energy Exploitations, the cover of the book is a picture from Africa with a military guy holding an Uzi, looking over the people mining for lithium, and it's a family, adults, males, females, kids 6 years old, mining for the stuff by hand. That's gold, and they're mining for it so we can benefit and drive our EV.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, interesting. Almost, uh, uh, always a pleasure to talk to you. And let me say, send private message. Uh, your address. It's an honor for me to send a mug for you. And Luca, for you too, I would like to send me your address to via private message. But we have another comment here, please, Ronald. That will not happen. Globalism is failing. Pseudoscientist is the name. What do you see?
Well, the problem I have with the people setting our energy policies is they have the microphone, but they won't have a conversation. They'll speak into the microphone. I mean, Greta Thunberg, the Australian teenager, got a great following. She speaks into the microphone. She has her social media followers, but she won't sit down and have a debate. I would love to say, well, I'd love to get rid of fossil fuels, but she's using electronics that are made with fossil fuels. And if we get rid of fossil fuels, her ability to be on social media goes to zero. So it's like I say, if we get rid of fossil fuels today, because we populate from 1 to 8 billion people, that'd be an instantaneous way to get rid of a couple of billion people. From diseases, malnutrition, weather-related deaths. I think that's totally immoral. And, without a replacement, you're curtailing the fossil fuel sources and the manufacturing that comes from it. It's a kiss of death for America and the world.
Yeah. Thanks, Armando. Great to see Ron, your show. His words never listen. Yeah, very good. So, using these words of Luca, I would like to thank you again, Ronald. Always a pleasure. I hope that you can repeat other ways, other chance to talk to you again.
We'll definitely do that. And like I say, just encourage people to have conversation. Like I say, I'm 100% in favor of getting rid of fossil fuels, but before I jump out of that airplane without a parachute, I'd like to know there's a backup plan to replace the products that are part of our daily lives.
Yeah, we need everything. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you, Luca and pseudoscientist. Thank you, Ronald. Have a good day.
Thank you, Armando. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.